Please note this meeting may be filmed or recorded by the Council. This is item 1. Item 2. Apologies for absence. Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Basu, Carlin, Ajay and Hinchcliffe.
Thank you. Item 3. Any late items or urgent business? Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, there are 3 late items of business which could not be available earlier and which will need to be dealt with at this meeting. Item 6, minutes of the Council meeting held on the 27th of November 2018, which were not included in the Council pack and need to be agreed at this meeting. Item 7, Mayor's communication, to allow the most recent events attended by the Mayor to be included in the Council pack. And item 13, budget amendments. Council Standing Order 15.8b allows amendments to recommendations to be put forward by 10 a.m. on the day of the meeting.
Thank you. Item 4. I'd like to ask members if they have any declarations of interest. Please indicate. Start with the leader.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary, non-beneficial interest in item number 13, which is the medium-term financial strategy 1920 to 23-24, as I have a connection with Fortismere School.
Thank you. Councillor Poole.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Following conversation with the Deputy Head of Legal Services, I've been advised to declare an interest. I'm a leaseholder, and I invite colleagues that are either renting from Homes for Haringey or leaseholders to do the same, just on the side of caution. Thank you.
Councillor Barryman.
Thank you, Mayor. I would also like to declare a non-pecuniary, non-beneficial interest in item 13, as I have a connection with Fortismere School.
Councillor Mark Blake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too have a non-pecuniary, non-beneficial interest in item 13, as I have a connection with Fortismere School.
Thank you. Councillor Chatwani. I hope I pronounced this right.
Thank you. I'd like to declare an interest that I'm a leaseholder of Homes for Haringey.
Councillor, yes, Hakata. I'm terrible at pronouncing names.
Hakata, yeah. I'd like to declare an interest that I am a council tenant for Haringey.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Councillor Ross. I'm very interested in an item about gambling, as I work in the gambling industry.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Perhaps if we go line by line. Yeah.
I have to declare an interest in item 12. Oh, sorry. I have to declare an interest in item 12 because I'm on the board of Homes for Haringey.
I'd like to declare I have a non-pecuniary and non-beneficial interest in item 13, medium-term financial strategy 2019-20 to 2023-24, as I have a connection with Fortismere School.
Thank you. I think that's about it. Thank you very much, all of you. We move to item 5. Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, may I remind members of the need to consider whether they need to make a declaration in accordance with Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 in relation to unpaid community charge or council tax liability, which is 2 months or more outstanding. This requirement is detailed in the Council summons. Members to whom this applies must make a declaration if they are present at any part of the meeting and must not vote on any matter relating to the budget. It is not sufficient for such members to refrain from voting or to absent themselves from the chamber for particular parts of the meeting. Failure to make the relevant declaration constitutes a criminal offence.
Thank you very much. And then we come to item 6. This is the minutes from the previous council meeting.
Madam Mayor, I would ask the Council to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November 2018 and the 31st of January 2019.
Are they agreed? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much. Item 7, I would like to draw members' attention to the table information about my engagements since last ordinary meeting in November. I have attended to date 163 events and functions through the Borough of City of London. And I specifically like to thank Councillor Pico. She done 68 engagements, and I'd like to thank her for her support, commitment to the Borough, and for covering for me. I have been very unwell with the problems I have with my back, and she's been wonderful, stepping in the last minute. So I'd like to thank you, Sheila. I have been extremely busy around the Christmas period. I visited schools, attended a number of faith events, Christmas markets, and I have enjoyed being out in the community. That's when I am at my best. It's such a privilege and a pleasure to meet all those different organizations in our borough. Item 8, Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, I have no matters to report.
Item 9, report of the monitoring officer.
Madam Mayor, I too have no matters to report.
Thank you. Item 10, I call on Councillor Amin to move her report together with any recommendations it contains. Can I ask Councillor Amin, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move the recommendations and the report to the full Council and to colleagues. Thanks.
Are the recommendations agreed? Excellent, thank you. Item 11, I call on Councillor Diagidis to move his report together with any recommendations it contains.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In moving the recommendations, can I draw attention to members on two important aspects? This is our statement of our strategy for handling our financial transactions related to any kind of borrowing or lending of money, which is quite substantial. As you know, in the past, various public sector agencies, including a number of local authorities, had got their fingers burnt and appeared not to have been very good at risk minimization and so on. We worked very hard. The situation seems to have improved tremendously. We worked with our external advisors, with our external auditor, and we are satisfied now that what we got is much better than in the past, and also that it is fit for the purpose, and that is quite important. There are a few little outstanding issues that we raise for longer term, like around LOBO loans and possibly the implications of Brexit on our finances and so on which we will be working over the next few months. The second point is the strategy as well is including an analysis of all the factors in advising the Council on what is the borrowing limits that we've got. And you would see that, bearing all the factors into account, including the recent increase in the or removal of the borrowing caps in the HRA, our borrowing limit has increased substantially from the last figure that I had reported to this Council. Is now standing at about £1.1 billion, which is sufficient to cover our ambitious capital programme, as we will see at the next item on the medium-term financial strategy. So I think overall I feel able to recommend that we approve that strategy. If I can also mention one little thing, Madam Mayor, we all have a responsibility, whether members of the committee or not, or what's called fiduciary duty, to make sure that we understand how our finances are handled in general. We are running certain courses with external specialists and our own specialist officers, so that we learn, all of us, the basics. That's open to all members of the Council from both sides of the House, and I would like to urge people on the next course we will run, will happen, Please attend if you can, because it's much better when we ask questions, where we comment, or when we put our hands up on decisions, that we have the basic understanding. It's not rocket science. Might be difficult, but it's not rocket science. And with a little bit of interest, we can really become a learning authority. I move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The recommendations on the Treasury Management Strategy appears under the budget item. When it will be decided on later. We are at item 12. I have accepted a deputation for this evening's meeting. I call on Mr. Paul Graham to come forward and make the deputation. When you're ready.
Good evening. I'm here with Jacob Secker and Franklin Thomas, who will help to answer your questions. This deputation relates to the document on page 171 of your reports pack. And the first thing to say is about tenant service charges, where considerable increases are being proposed. Now, the increases are being proposed even though Haringey's tenant services this year are being brought in within budget. Well done, but it makes us wonder what is the basis for any of the increases which are being proposed. Because the only legal basis for tenant service charges is the actual costs of the charges of the services themselves. This is well known, is more widely observed at times in the breach than in the observance. So I wanted to ask councillors, or ask myself a couple of questions. Firstly, wouldn't it be a miracle if council tenants, many of whom haven't got any money to begin with, could support a corporate income stream to just one company of, say, £1.5 million a year? Secondly, what would happen if that particular company was not satisfied with a high and stable income stream but wanted an income that steeply increased year after year? Could that aspiration be met? And the answer, of course, is yes, if the company is Veolia and if the service charge is number 4 on your list, which is called street sweeping, otherwise known as waste management, otherwise known as very poor service, otherwise known as why do they treat us like this, otherwise known as have a look on Twitter, to be honest. Now, this service charge went up by 22% this time last year. We know that Veolia and Homes for Haringey have had a serious dispute over the last year. This has now been resolved, as we know, because the service charge is going up by 15% if you vote for this document. That's an increase in revenue of £633,000 in just 2 years, coming directly from tenants on council estates. And how much is going to be made from leaseholders, we don't know, but it's going to be a considerable amount. And it's the same story for other services. Concierge going up, grounds maintenance going up. Door entry maintenance, also an outsourced service. The charge has gone up by 40%, but the budget for the service to the tenants is only going up by 17%. So what's happened? Most likely, an officer's made a mistake. Most likely, nobody's bothered to check. Most likely, nobody cares. Most likely, it's the service charge that's considered to be the priority and not the service. So, and the bad news for us has been, the difficulty we've faced is that this council will no longer carry out consultation with us about service charges and kept this information quiet until after the budget consultation had come to an end. And we know that Haringey Council has followed this strategy for a long time of using high service charges, being one of the 3 highest London boroughs on tenant service charging. So, who's it going to affect? It's the poorest who are going to lose out in future years when government imposes above average, above inflation rent increases for council tenants as they plan to do. The danger is that rent rises in the future plus high service charges equal poverty. And despite all of that, there is another story about Haringey which we are well aware of and remember and celebrate. We remember the 2009 national rent increases when both Haringey tenants and Haringey councillors lobbied government together successfully. We beat those rent increases. It was a victory which we should not forget. The same is true of the story about the HDV. Tenants, residents and councillors of both parties represented here worked together to do the right thing, breaking down quite a few barriers along the way. And therefore, we think that approach needs to be adopted today. We welcome the fact that this administration has got a cabinet member for insourcing. However, his chances and the cabinet's chances of dealing with these companies is minimal by themselves. What we need to do is to have proper consultation, take these proposed charges away for the present time, have a proper consultation about how we're going to address the issues. And please, as a recommendation then, please take this away tonight until proper consultation has been completed and the issues which we've highlighted have been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions? Yes.
Mr Burnham, you brought a similar deputation to the last Cabinet meeting. Have you received any response from the Cabinet in the meantime?
No. We were very disappointed by the fact that there was no officer report. One would have expected, and it happened in the past, a detailed officer report making the case for the changes that are being proposed. We didn't have that at the Cabinet and we haven't had it since.
Councillor Bevan.
Paul, I wasn't going to speak. You've actually said something that I need to respond to as a board member and director of Homes for Haringey, representing the council on that board. You actually said nobody cares. I do take exception to that remark because I meet many staff, and especially the frontline staff in Homes for Haringey, and some of the issues that they have to put up with is just beyond belief. So I think for you to say that nobody cares is really not acceptable. And I would comment also on the one point you made about the street cleaning service. You have tenants on the board as well. Tenants are elected to the Homes for Haringey board. One of the issues that come up 18 months ago was the cleaning on the estates was not up to the required standard, and the cleaning was actually improved and increased. And that service is considered by residents as one of the most important services that they appreciate. So I feel for you to pick that out and use that one example for your argument is really not acceptable.
Sorry, Councillor Blake.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor. We're concerned about the increases. We're concerned about the increases, and we can see that the company that's got that contract is holding on to the contract and is more concerned about the profit which they make than about the service that's provided. The other points that you made are perfectly valid ones to bring into the consultation when we have it. We would look forward to hearing that consultation take place.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Paul, can you tell me how many London councils actually consult on service charges, please?
No, I don't have that information to hand. There has been a discussion about whether or not there is a legal obligation to consult. It has been argued by some lawyers that there is not a legal obligation. We would argue that there is a legal obligation, but certainly that it is good practice to do so. In the past, when we've had consultations on service charges, the council has agreed not to proceed with proposed service charges. Most famously, the proposed service charge for litter picking on estates on public holidays. Seriously proposed by Haringey Council. After consultation, you did not go ahead with that charge.
Okay, thank you. Can I call on Cabinet Member for Finances to respond to the deputation, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr Burnham, for your deputation. I'll try and take each of the points in turn. So the consultation, first of all, I think we said when you came to Cabinet that we will take this into account when looking at what we do or what is appropriate in future years. As you mentioned yourself, you don't know how many other London councils do it. Legal advice we've had is that we are not required to consult, simply that the charges must cover the cost and no more, and that people shouldn't pay for services they don't benefit from. So you shouldn't pay for a lift if you live in a ground floor, well, in a single-storey building. The charges themselves, yeah, some have gone up, some have gone down. Over 10 years, I was looking, they across the board, the average is below the rate of inflation. So I don't think it could be said the council are using this as a means of extracting money in hard times or anything like that. They just generally are a reflection of cost, which is why sometimes they go down as well as up, especially utility charges. I mean, yeah, the ones that have gone up the most this year in terms of what they would cost weekly, something like the concierge charge, which is now proposed to be around £16.80 per week, which is a 7% rise. And my understanding is this mainly reflects better terms and conditions for those concierge staff. Similar cases being made around grounds maintenance and street sweeping, where our commitment as a London living wage has increased some of the costs of delivering that service. Overall, I think we have to try and make sure that council housing, we can afford to deliver council housing. The government has enforced upon all councils rent cuts of 1% a year for 4 years now, which does mean as a council, we're not consulted on that, you're not consulted on that. That is something that is enforced upon us, but it does make it hard for council housing as a byproduct to become viable. These charges are in no way there to make up for that, but I just wanted to point out, we don't get consulted on that from the government. That's not why we're not consulting you. But overall, I think most council tenants are better off this year in terms of what they pay per week for their household, which is something that we celebrate, and we want to invest more in council housing. But again, I thank you for your deputation, and we will take on board that comment about consultation when we look at future years, what's appropriate. Thank you.
Please join me in a round of applause as our deputation leaves the chamber and moves to the public gallery.
Hi, Amir. I would just like to add something which I want to say, which I think should be said. I've been living in Northumberland Park since...
We have come to the end of this item. If you want to say something very briefly, a minute, otherwise we...
I've been living in Northumberland Park since the year of 1973, okay? 1973, and it's the dirtiest, nastiest place that you can think of at the moment because of outsourcing to Veolia. I work for 3 Haringey Council associations, which is Enterprise, Haringey Enterprise, and not Veolia, Accord, Haringey Accord. And it's the dirtiest that I've seen it in a long time.
Okay, and can I say that I think the best way forward is to email the cabinet member for housing and inform her of the problems you experience there, or perhaps even have a short meeting with her. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to look into this complaint. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry?
What about the service charges? How are you going to increase service charges?
No, I don't think we can resolve it here. I think if there are problems, I'm sorry to hear that, you should email the cabinet member for housing, and she will make sure that she will look into it and even have.
But what the council are going to do about outsourcing and service charging?
We have to move on. It's not a debate on housing, but I mean. If you have an issue with your housing estate, the best thing is to email the cabinet member or go and see her at her surgery. Thank you very much for coming. Now we move to item 13. I will start by asking the Deputy Monitor Officer to give the meeting some advice in respect of the voting requirements for budget votes. Deputy Monitor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Local Authorities (Standing Orders) England Amendment Regulations 2014 and the Council's Standing Orders require the Council to record in the minutes how each councillor voted, including any abstentions, when determining the Council's budget and the level of council tax to be levied. The only requirement is to record in the minutes of the meeting how each member voted. Given there are 5 amendments and a substantive motion to be voted on, it could be recorded in the minutes of the meeting how each member voted, including any who have abstained, by a show of hands.
Thank you. Can I therefore ask that the advice is noted and asked and acted on when we come to the voting on this item, including each amendment. Is that agreed? Excellent, thank you. The process for considering the item will be as follows. I will call upon the Cabinet Member for Finance, Councillor Berryman, to introduce the report and move the amendments. The recommendations, containing at page 100 of the agenda pack. This is a section 3.1, recommendations A to O. 15 minutes will be allowed for this. This will then be seconded by the Leader of the Council. This will be for 5 minutes. I have received notice of amendments to the budget from the opposition. They will be moved by Councillor Denison for 7 minutes in total, and then seconded by Councillor Morris. There will then be a debate. The debate will be up to 45 minutes, and members will be asked to keep their contribution to 3 minutes only. I will consider allowing further time if there are large numbers of members wishing to speak on this item. At the conclusion of the debate, Councillor Denison will respond for 5 minutes, followed by Councillor Berryman's summing up for 10 minutes. The Council will then vote on each of the amendments in turn, followed by the substantive recommendations. Can I say that you don't have to speak for 10 minutes if you don't wish? A shorter time would be good. Very welcome. I'd like to ask Councillor Berryman, please introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've never had longer than 3 minutes in this chamber, so I'm going to use some of it. So, good evening and thank you. Tonight I'm here to present the Council's budget for 2019-20 and the MTFS for the next 5 years. Before I do, I'll just say that, as the last deputation demonstrated, in Haringey we have a very intelligent and engaged set of residents, which is why I'm not going to start this budget tonight by pretending that it is going to be something they are entirely happy with, because neither am I. And how could we be with another £13.5 million of budget reductions to deliver over the next 12 months, at the same time as the demand for and cost of delivering vital council services continue to rise? Some of this demand rising is a result of austerity, the unimaginative Tory plan to cut the government deficit, regardless of the cost to lives and even to economic growth itself. And austerity is not over. Not over despite, last week, a £15 billion record monthly budget surplus for the government that was announced, the largest for 25 years and enough for the Tory Chancellor to reinstate almost all of the cuts made to local government funding since 2010. But of course he won't do that, because austerity is a choice, and instead here in Haringey we face a 9th year of funding cuts, which is why I couldn't hardly stand here and say that the budget is delivering all we want. But nevertheless, a budget is a tool, and looked at in the round, revenue and capital, as we have tried to do this year, it can be used to take us where we want to go, even if we're not there yet. This Labour administration has been clear with residents where we want to go, and that is to make Haringey a better and fairer place. Our budget prioritises groups who have suffered the most at the hands of austerity: young people, women, those on low income, and those wanting and needing an affordable and stable home. This budget puts money where it can into those groups. In this MTFS, we are increasing our spending on youth services. We are putting money into reopening some of our day centres. We're also investing in adapting homes and, most significantly, investing in council housing. It's why unlike the Tory government, Labour believe in investment. It's why every company does it. In fact, even the Tories are waking up to this. They had to after Northampton and such, and are reversing some of their failed policies. In October last year, Theresa May lifted the cap on councils' ability to borrow in their housing revenue accounts. This will further enable us to fulfil our manifesto pledge to deliver 1,000 more council homes. This budget, therefore, champions investment. Moving on to some of the detail. In last year's budget, my predecessor, Councillor Arthur, said that the council is the last line of defence, and he was right. At its simplest, this means we're expected to be there to shield our residents from some of the worst problems life throws at them, as life can be hard, especially in parts of Haringey where there are some real socio-economic inequalities. These problems can even get to the point where families without support can fall apart and a child's life can be put in danger. And there is nothing more serious than that. Sometimes we must step in and become the parent, as we are in Haringey, to almost 500 children. And it's why I'm relieved to say this budget not only protects most of our children's services, but puts some extra money in. We also need to be here for other vulnerable groups, such as the elderly person with dementia, the families caring for a child or adult with a disability, or for the many households facing homelessness, nearly 3,000 in temporary accommodation in Haringey. This budget invests in all those groups. We have also, in this budget, written off some unachievable and impossible savings, both in children's and also adult social care, where a recognised national funding crisis exists. And therefore, we've helped to improve the deliverability of this budget, since, as officers often remind me, setting a budget is one thing, the next stage is delivering it. But councils, in my view, shouldn't be reduced to simply being the last line of defence. The Haringey councils I grew up under, and my children until 2010, when austerity started, used to do so much more. There are some great things we did that are no longer around. Some of the day centres I just mentioned for vulnerable older people, the Meals on Wheels that provided a contact with the outside world, the respite centres for autistic adults and their families. As have many of the council-run play schemes, youth clubs and play services that I and others in the chamber enjoyed in our youth in Haringey and elsewhere. Safe spaces off the streets where all kinds mingled. We want to do that again. Philip Hammond's £15 billion surplus last week should be a rallying call for councils to challenge the government to respect local government and restore proper, stable funding, not leaving us over-reliant on grants, one-off grants or risky business rates, just as high streets are facing unprecedented challenges, or developers' contributions and so forth. The tipping point for local government finance has passed. Northampton showed that. We can no longer pretend things are right, not when youth murders are at decade-high levels, where there is rough sleeping under bridges and in doorways across London, and with health inequalities rising. The cuts are now causing the problems. So that's why we've taken the decision to raise council tax by 2.99%, the first rise on the Haringey element of council tax for over 9 years. That's around 73 pence for the average family per week, which is the price of a Kit Kat or, if you're me, a Topic, and brings in 3 million more for our services, while we also protect those least able to afford council tax by extending the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, CTRS, support to 100% for 6,000 families on the lowest income, a policy that flies in the face of austerity, that redresses the balance back towards some of the hardest hit groups, such as single mums bringing up children on very low income. We are proud of delivering on that manifesto commitment in our first year and thank officers for their commitment in putting it together with the deadlines that are set by government last summer when they could have been on holiday. This extra money allows us to keep funding some of our other key services that we're proud we do still deliver in Haringey, like our 9 libraries, which we've maintained, or one of my own favourites, and there'll be groans from councillors who are on the back benches with me, Pendarren. A fantastic council-owned activity centre in Wales, celebrating, I think, around 42 years, Deputy Mayor will know, where school children from across the borough take a life-changing holiday, where a child from Northumberland Park experiences exactly the same week abseiling and rock climbing in the hills and valleys of Wales as his or her contemporary from, say, Highgate Ward. We all know the stark inequalities across Haringey. We are maintaining our investment in this iconic asset that means that those two children share a common experience. Something they will always have in common if their paths cross later in life. We are also reinvesting and expanding on our summer programme that was launched last summer and welcomed by parents during the hot weeks of the school holidays in London. Remember, many children don't leave London during the school holidays. There are hard realities to council finances today, but we have prioritised where we can, using our budget as a tool for change. Finally, this brings me back to the theme of investment. Economists have long evidenced that it's civic investment that leads to economic growth, not the other way around. It is civic investment in education, infrastructure, culture, music, people that precedes economic growth. It's civic investment, and I'm repeating myself now. In this budget, I'm proud to say we have focused on doing that. Be it the extra invested in youth, paying key care staff the London living wage to improve outcomes, or the big investments like the £250 million in capital over 5 years improving our council housing stock. Plus a further potential eye-watering £750 million to deliver new council homes. We're planning big investments. Our only Grade 1 publicly owned building, Bruce Castle Museum, will benefit. £10 million expanding Osborne Grove and keeping it open. £12 million into supporting assisted living. Another £10 million adapting homes for children and adults with disabilities. £2 million into Hornsey Library. 20 million into roads, and so on and so on. We are aware of the risks to some of these schemes, and not least as well the risk of Brexit, which is why we've been securing long-term stable funding on these investments as we need them. But despite the continued tough times for local government, we believe we have used this budget to chart that course to a fairer and better Haringey. And we may even then, and while the memory still burns inside those of us who can recall a more developed, benevolent day for local government, we will keep fighting. And we may even then see a return to another one of my own personal Haringey favourites. And there's no point being finance lead if you can't champion a few of your own favourites. And that's the annual free fireworks show at Ali Pali. That helped engineer that magic quality that even the developers talk about. That every community needs, cohesion. It was ended after the financial crisis in 2008, a crisis few in Haringey played a role in causing, present company, and asked for your support. What am I doing? In the here and now, though, I thank you for listening and ask for your support in passing this budget tonight. I think I need some reading glasses. I thank colleagues in the Labour group and the local Labour Party. I thank officers, even the opposition, and look forward to us working together as a vibrant and engaged local council to make Haringey better and fairer. I recommend this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bannerman. Can I ask Councillor Ejiofor to second the recommendations, please?
I'd like to second formally and reserve my right to speak later, please, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I have Councillor Dennison. Can I ask you to move your amendments, please?
Madam Mayor, I'm very pleased to be proposing the Liberal Democrat amendments this evening. These provide a flavour of the choices a Liberal Democrat administration would prioritise and represent a fully costed and deliverable proposals that show once again that in Haringey the Liberal Democrats are leading the agenda. I would like to start on a positive note. We welcome aspects of this budget. The end of the Haringey Development Vehicle and the setting up of a wholly owned company to deliver new council homes, and the reopening of care homes and day centres. We are happy to see these ideas proposed, as these were proposed in the Chamber last time by the Liberal Democrats at previous budget meetings. Unfortunately, to stay truthful, I have to be more critical for the rest of this speech. When these proposals were put forward by my colleagues past and present, they were voted down by Labour, only to be adopted months or years later. So today we have Labour implementing Liberal Democrat policies from last year, when we proposed the end to the HDV, and from 2011 onwards, when we led campaigns against Labour's closures to our day centres and care homes. Perhaps this evening we should skip the political dance and delays of past administrations, put partisanship aside and support our amendments without the usual lag. Madam Mayor, local government continues to face unprecedented funding cuts. Much has and undoubtedly will be said of the austerity agenda and its impact on this authority and its residents. But let's be clear, Labour has lost all credibility, and I will not take any lectures about austerity from a party that has chosen to facilitate a policy that will bring this country towards a precipice of financial disaster that will make the last financial crash look like a walk in the park. Brexit will make every single person in Haringey poorer, have severe consequences for the state of this borough's finances, and is contrary to the 76% of voters in this borough that want to remain in the European Union. It is an economic disaster that Labour have helped to realise. Whether it's Corbyn's tacit agreement to a Tory Brexit deal or Labour here in Haringey failing to call for residents to have a final say. These are the choices that Labour have decided to make. Madam Mayor, it's these choices that define the direction of a council, and our residents see in this budget that Labour have chosen to cut the flexible policing fund in times when policing is stretched more than ever. Labour have chosen to cut discounts for residents to our health centres when they should be promoting healthier living and trying to prevent future budget impacts on health and social care. Labour have chosen to cut ward budgets when engagement with and empowerment of our communities should be a priority. Yet conversely, Labour continues to choose to spend millions of pounds on communications, £1.7 million on consultants, continuously fails to rebalance the workforce away from expensive agency staff, spends £10 million on its most senior staff, and has had to use millions of pounds of reserves in this last year alone to balance its books. These choices have resulted in Haringey's own homemade financial crisis created by Labour. Madam Mayor, unprecedented cuts to local government have only laid bare the years of unprecedented failure by Labour to transform services in Haringey and protect frontline services. I understand that hard choices have to be made. Unfortunately, Labour have made a litany of bad ones. In contrast, Liberal Democrats are willing to make these hard choices to tackle the systemic change needed to deliver modern council services. We do this with our eyes open to the reality of an age of less resource for local government, not, as this Labour administration seems to choose, kicking the can down the road, providing no new thinking, abandoning work with other local authorities to deliver services together and lower costs, all in the hope for better times ahead. We are not waiting for Jeremy to ride in on his gold-plated unicorn. Our amendments provide an indication of the different direction Liberal Democrats would choose. My colleagues will touch on more details surrounding these specifics in the proposals, but I would like to set out why these are the right choices for our borough. Madam Mayor, our amendments provide funding for the areas of the council that have been hit by funding cuts chosen by Labour. In 2011, Labour chose to cut 75% of the budget for our youth services. This was opposed by many at the time, including Tottenham MP David Lammy, who said that the council should review its decision and fight to protect frontline services. Liberal Democrats would start to put this right by setting up a £1 million youth fund. It would help existing local community groups to deliver small and medium-term projects that would help younger people in our borough. This would be funded by a reduction in the cost of our expensive temporary and agency staff by setting up an in-house recruiter to put our council services on a stronger footing with full-time staff and ending a much-maligned Hayes recruitment contract. Madam Mayor, Liberal Democrats believe in devolving power and funding to our neighbourhoods to deliver services that respond to the diverse nature of each area in Haringey. We would establish neighbourhood funds, diverting £1.5 million away from senior staff and spending on personal assistance to empower communities to support voluntary groups and lead improvements in their local amenities. In a year when many of our parks lost their green flag status on Labour's watch and green waste fly tipping increased by 50%, Liberal Democrats would propose to invest £250,000 in new park wardings and ending Labour's green waste charges. This would be funded by reducing the expense of consultants and show how the Liberal Democrats choose to prioritise spending on our parks and improve recycling. Liberal Democrats have always provided new and innovative ways to raise revenue. We are proposing a new workplace parking levy which will help to reduce traffic and pollution in our borough and provide funding for more no idling zones around our schools and investment in active travelling. Labour continue to use millions of pounds of taxpayers' money on communications. From Haringey People to a £7,000 video telling residents how the government had taken all the council's money away, Liberal Democrats would cut the comms budget by £400,000 and reverse Labour's policing cuts to help make our borough safer and provide more funding that our police deserve. Madam Mayor, this budget is about making the right choices. I have set out different choices that this Labour administration could choose to make. They can reduce the use of consultants further, help transform our council by setting up an in-house recruiter and end expensive outsourcing, fund our police and parks better, back new innovative revenue-raising proposals, trust our communities to prioritise where they want their money spent, and provide council funding that show our young people that we want to support them. Councillors on both sides of this chamber can change and make different choices. I hope we can all do what's right and support these amendments. Thank you.
Councillor Morris, can I ask you to second the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is my great pleasure to be seconding this amendment. I'd like to start by thanking John Warlow and his team, who've worked with us for many months to create a package of budget amendments that are fully costed and deliverable. We all know that this has been a very tough financial year here on Haringey Council, with substantial further savings to make next year. As a council, we must reduce our costs. Other councils manage with flatter senior management structures. Other councils use in-house recruitment teams rather than expensive recruitment companies. And as we all know, temporary staff, agency staff and consultants are not value for money and mean that we are not growing our own talent pool. Savings in these areas will provide funds to be allocated at a community level by creating a young person's funds and neighbourhood funds for local groups to bid for. Savings would also provide additional budget to improve care in Haringey. We know how horrified carers were when Labour chose to shut daycare centres in 2011. We know how horrified their carers, and how relieved they were to hear that they would be reopening them, but now disappointed that the council sees this as an opportunity to save money rather than improve care. We'd also spend money on making our communities greener, with more park wardens, more tree planting and an end to green waste charges. Furthermore, we'd set up a workplace parking levy based on the successful model of Nottingham Council. We would use the money raised to increase the number of school streets, to protect our children from harmful pollution and to make walking and cycling safer and easier. And speaking of safety, our group would also reverse this administration's cuts to flexible police resourcing. Violent crime has left our communities shocked and unsettled. It is therefore very worrying that last week Cabinet ignored OSC's recommendation and instead approved taking even more police off our streets. Our budget amendments reflect a philosophy, a liberal philosophy. Our largest spending priorities direct money not towards the council, but to community groups who are the backbone of life in this borough. We believe that not only can they be trusted with money, resources and responsibility, but they are closer to the lives of residents than the council. We believe that makes them most effective agents for positive change in the lives of young people and the future of our neighbourhoods. Thank you.
There will now be a debate on the item for the period of 45 minutes. There are a large number of members wishing to speak on this item. So can I ask you all to speak no more than 3 minutes each, please? So we start with Councillor Goons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My speech would certainly be not more than 3 minutes. Colleagues, the impact of damaging government austerity policy for the last 9 years, which the opposition party was an accomplice to those 5 years of those 9 years, left those 9 years left many councils like Haringey unable to respond to the growing needs of the community. Having to prioritise the needs of the most vulnerable in our community, with those living on the edge of the poverty, was a constant challenge for this administration. I'm proud to say we are committed to do the right by our community on the face of the challenging circumstances. As a proud member of this administration, I'm proud to say that this administration has the right political vision that will help us to tackle the growing inequality in our community. I'm particularly proud to speak in support of the council tax reduction scheme proposed under this current budget. The proposed council tax reduction scheme will offer 100% support for working-age families on the lowest income category. I welcome the fact that this budget will particularly benefit women, a group hardest hit by austerity policies, according to various independent reports, including a report by House of Lords. About 6,100 Haringey families with children will benefit from lower council tax bills. In average, they will be better off by £250 a year. Of those families, over 65% are lone parents household, with almost all being led by women, i.e. single mums. Almost half of them have children under 5, which clearly makes working challenging for lone parent household. We will provide support for those families and lessen the financial hardship. Approximately 3,000 families will receive full 100% support. This will have positive health benefits and narrow the inequality, and our commitment that this administration is absolutely committed to. I note 12% of those families benefiting from this policy are either receiving court summons currently or missed payments last year. Madam Mayor, this policy is our chance to tip the balance back in favour of women after 9 years of government austerity, and I'm proud to be part of an administration that made this happen. Thank you.
Councillor Julia Gill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking in support of the Liberal Democrats Amendment 4, which reverses the Council's proposal to cease funding for police partnership team. We had expressed concern about this proposal at full scrutiny, and we did ask Cabinet to reconsider, but sadly they refused to do so. The case has already been made as to why funding should continue, but I'll repeat some of it just now. Ending this funding contradicts the objectives of the Borough Plan to improve community confidence and reduce the fear of crime, which, according to the Borough Survey, is the most serious concern for those living in the east of the borough and the second gravest concern for those living in the west. In short, it would affect the most vulnerable areas of the borough, particularly in the east, which has an overall higher number of victims of crime. The weekly members' update that we received this afternoon highlights the importance of this team, with several arrests for drugs and weapons-related offences, leading to the seizure of 3 zombie knives and 1 large kitchen knife just in the last month. Seizing any council funding for flexible police resourcing would lead to more costs being incurred elsewhere, having a knock-on effect on local safe neighbourhoods team. This is why we have found funding so that should the Mayor's match fund cease, the Council can continue to fund the partnership team beyond March 2019. The Liberal Democrats believe capping communication spending at £1 million would fund our proposed amendments. For example, as I've already been mentioned, scrapping Haringey people, which currently costs £72,000, and which, let's face it, is really a propaganda tool used to push Labour's one-sided, rose-tinted vision of the council, and especially when residents tell us they actually find out what is happening from the council through the Liberal Democrats. We've already heard the austerity excuse because, as we know, all of Haringey's problem, even those that happened before I was born, started from 2010. But we have shown that by reducing waste and financial mismanagement, we can find funding to protect vital services that genuinely protect the people of Haringey. Let's start by putting policing over publicity. Thank you.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to make a few points in relation to my Cabinet area. I'm delighted that we've delivered our budget commitment for additional investment in youth services of £250,000 for the next financial year, despite all the budget pressures that Councillor Berryman has outlined. This money will fund our school holiday programmes and the development of community-based provision in Wood Green and Hornsey, which will be very much linked to our successful bid to the Mayor's Young Londoners Fund, where Haringey has secured £1.5 million over 3 years, which will help us establish an in-house team of detached youth workers, the external recruitment process for which has commenced. However welcome this additional expenditure is, the scale of the challenges we face in relation to serious youth violence demands a change in policy from national government. We need additional resources to support our young people and the decimation to those services of 8 years of coalition and Tory austerity. But what makes it worse is a Tory Home Secretary who would prefer to posture and criminalise young people through bad legislative proposals such as knife crime orders than speak to those most affected by serious youth violence. That's why our Youth at Risk strategy will go to Cabinet in March after wide-ranging consultation, and we will put the views of those young people most affected by these issues at its heart, however uncomfortable and challenging that may make things for the Council and our partners. Councillor Dennison raised the issue of the ending of our co-funding with the Met for Haringey-based police officers. This is regrettable, but the Met have ended this co-funding scheme, and clearly we've had some difficult decisions to make through this budget round. I am, however, delighted to report that the Mayor of London, the Labour Mayor of London, has committed an additional £110 million to the Met's budget for next year. Hopefully, in Haringey, we can see an increase in officers on the beat, building relationships and trust that are central to community cohesion, that our borough demands, which I know is something that council members and Haringey citizens want to see more of. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Friday evening, I went to a very well-attended meeting with the neighbourhood police covering 5 of the wards in the west of the borough. And they told us that burglary was up in 2018. I myself was burgled, so can appreciate the concerns of residents. A priority area for the police at the moment is violent and knife crime, which, again, is something that we are all in this room aware of. Residents voice many concerns, and it's clear that our police are working really hard for us, but they need more resource, not less. So we want to prioritise police on our streets in Haringey, and one of our budget proposals is to cut comms, not cops. We would seek to cut £400,000 from the Council's comms budget to reverse a proposed cut of 6 police officers. We would cap the comms budget at £1 million. Under the Liberal Democrats, the Council would no longer spend about £7,000 on animated video, telling we residents that the Council has no money left and can only afford services that residents really need and value. We wonder how many residents need and value the propaganda magazine that is Haringey People. A magazine that, in its last edition, had 17 photos and/or direct mentions of a Labour politician. A magazine that would have residents believe that there is only one party that exists in Haringey. Nowhere in all the videos, tweets and articles featuring local Labour politicians will you find mention of allegations of bullying and racism toward traders at the Ward's Corner Latin American market. Nowhere will you find mention of Labour setting up and then shutting down the Haringey development vehicle at a cost to taxpayers of millions. And nowhere will you find mention of the plan to cut 6 police officers while pumping out propaganda disguised as comms. So if councils are the last line of defence, why would police numbers be reduced? Haringey Liberal Democrats have a simple proposal on one of our amendments, which is to keep the police and cut the comms.
Councillor Das-Neves.
Mayor,
friends, colleagues, have you ever needed some change for a pint of milk and you've looked in your purse, then you've gone in your partner's purse, then you've looked at all the coin collections around in your house to find those final pennies, and then you find yourself rooting around under the sofa cushions to finally make up that prized amount? Well, that's a little bit like what local government budgeting looks like from my point of view as a scrutiny chair. Except, actually, it's nothing like that, because this is funding for really important things, and there is very little money. Funding for our young people, for our children, for our older people in need of support, those with a disability in need of assistance or care. It's funding to keep our streets clean, our parks beautiful, to give us green space so we can breathe more freely and feel more easy. It is funding for all this and more. For our social fabric, for our community, for cohesion, and for the joy of daily life. Who would be a newly elected councillor in these circumstances? As we know, 122 million cut from our budget, and that's not spare change. The flesh has been cut, the gristle has been cut, the marrow is gone, we are carving bones. And I'm afraid the most in need suffer the most. Those who need a safety net have none. Why? Because this government and its predecessor coalition believe in austerity, in small state, no state, no safety nets. The coalition, that is the Tories and the Liberal Democrats, slashed local government funding to the tune of 11 billion, axed police officers and their police front desks, cut the adult skills budget, abolished income support for some lone parents, and withdrew guaranteed income to GP practices, to name a few things. All that was not enough. The current government continued with austerity and continues today. We've made what we could of this budget. We have sought to help those we can and mitigate the impact of austerity with things like the council tax reduction scheme. But this councillor will take no hypocrisy from those austerity-loving supporters here. Perhaps they would like to join us in opposing austerity. Perhaps they'd like to join the Labour Party and oppose austerity. I say no more Tory
Can I ask you to
cuts,
wind up, please?
No more posturing statements from Liberal Democrats. We must have a funding deal from government that protects our community and allows us to support places for all people, places that all people want to live in, with quality of life, dignity, humanity, fairness and freedom. Enough is enough.
Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It will not be a surprise to many that we made provision in our amendments tonight to eliminate green waste charges, to hire extra park wardens and to plant 125 trees a year. We have opposed green waste charges since they were introduced, called for better park management and more trees planting in our manifesto in the past month. Somehow, there is £1.7 million for consultants, but when it comes to other service, that can be done because we are reminded of austerity and cuts to the budget. We believe that green waste collection, park wardens and more trees could be provided to our residents if only this administration would be willing to cut down the numbers of consultants that we all know are expensive and use this money to fund services instead. When the green collection and bulk collection charges were introduced, despite our request, there was no attempt to offer a safety net or a reduced cost service to pensioners and to those on low incomes. So it's the most vulnerable to bear the cost, regardless they live in the west or in the east of the borough. As this represented value for the council or its residents, since charges were introduced, flight tipping incidents have gone up from 1,004 to 1,478, and this is almost a 50% increase. We also want to increase the number of park wardens to care for and help maintaining the green flag status of our parks. We have been told that we need big, noisy events in our parks because the money can be reinvested in maintaining them. How was the money from the wireless festivals and the likes being reinvested in Finsbury Park on Lordship Rec? This administration thinks it is okay to raise the price for its residents to use the park, but not for commercial events company. Why do residents have to put up with the noise, crowds, traffic and bus restrictions to keep the use of the parks competitive for the events company, if we don't use the revenue to improve them and we let them to deteriorate to such a state to lose the green flag? We hear a lot about air quality, 40-20 target, electric charging points and so on. But the truth is that the most effective barrier against pollution, greenery, is neglected. And this is not only about parks, it's also about trees. There has not been a tree planting budget for the past 2 years, and while the Council has dozens of senior managers, the team looking after the whole tree population of the borough has been left with just 2 officers. We all know that these amendments tonight might not pass, but we hope that it will be enough for this administration to see how the available funding could be spent differently. Can we suggest that rather than spending almost £2 million on consultants, some of this money could be better spent to deliver a greener, cleaner Haringey and improve the quality of life of the many residents who care for a patch of ground in the backyard or local park, who would love to walk without being surrounded by dumped stuff at every corner, and who would enjoy the shade of a tree. Thank you.
Councillor Demir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Austerity has been a disaster for this country, and local authorities like Haringey are on the front line of providing essential public service that have seen their budget cut and slashed in a punitive, mean-spirited and callous way. For example, in January 2015, there were 30,000 excess deaths, representing the largest increase in deaths in the post-war period. The excess deaths were largely on the older population who rely on health and social care. We are living in a situation whereby the Tories, enabled by the Lib Dems sitting on my right here, made appalling cuts to our budget, which will, of course, affect our ability to provide essential services. The cuts mean that councils will have lost 60p out of every £1 that the previous Labour government was spending on local authorities. Cuts to councils have been strikingly uneven. The poorest local authorities, which tend to be Labour-run, have had their spending cut by £228 per person, when compared to the richest boroughs of £44. Councils overspent on vital services to protect children by over £800 million last year, and there's a £3.5 billion gap in adult social care. Having said that, I'm proud that this Labour Council has set forth a budget in which, even under its constraints of austerity, we will make council tax fairer by extending the council tax reduction scheme to 100% for eligible residents, keeping our libraries open, investing in youth services, protecting frontline services in adult social care and children's, and the £1 billion investment in our housing stock and building new homes. We are doing what we can locally, but what we need is a general election, and yes, a Labour government committed to ending austerity so that we can rebalance our economy and put public services at the forefront of our agenda. Madam Mayor, I wasn't going to say anything, but the Lib Dems made a few comments about the Labour Party's past record, so I'll just say this. The comment made by Councillor Dennison that the idea that the financial crisis and the resulting austerity would be a walk in the park compared to Brexit is a massive insult to the millions of people living in Victorian levels of poverty in this country. I mean, that is probably the most Lib Demi thing I've heard in my life. However, I'll just say this as well. A former special advisor to Nick Clegg said this, and I quote, 4 years ago, Lib Dem ministers started agitating for the 5p charge on plastic bags. It took us months to persuade Cameron and Osborne. We finally got the policy in an eve of conference trade in return for tightening benefit sanctions. Now, this is the Lib Dems. And those benefit sanctions didn't go through because they were illegal, but you still voted for it. So we're not going to take any lessons from you. And I can't believe you're making some of the points you're making. Thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is an honour to be able to speak in favour of the first Lib Dem budget amendment, which sets out our commitment to the funding of youth services in Haringey. Our amendment puts the power firmly in the hands of the community and will seek to provide the necessary provisions for the young people of our borough to help them develop, make positive connections and learn useful skills for later in life. Passing this amendment would be a powerful break both with Haringey Labour's past policies and an alarming national trend for youth services to be some of the first services to be axed. These reckless cuts have seen more than 600 youth centres closed and nearly 140,000 youth service places lost in the UK between 2012 and 2016. We have been encouraged to see the Council make the most of funding opportunities, like with the Mayor's Young Londoners Fund. However, it is our belief that to ensure that we can maintain sustainable funding, we must be willing to pay out a bit of our budget locally. Without a statutory duty for councils to fund such services, as we would like to see, councils like Haringey must be bold enough to make youth services a key priority in their spending. £1 million to fund a variety of open access, targeted services and activities for young people would go a long way to broaden the opportunities available currently. The defunding of youth services has led many to lazily fall back on the idea that we only need these services to deter young people from crime. Whilst crime prevention is an important endeavour, it's right to provide as many young people as possible with opportunities to help them during their transition from young person to adulthood, whether it be providing them with places to feel safe, activities to express themselves, helping them learn new skills, feel valued and involved in their communities, or even just to give them something worthwhile to do. There are endless reasons to invest in our youth, and there are endless risks if we choose not to. From east to west, our young people deserve better. They contribute so much to Haringey, and now it's time we help contribute to giving them a better future here too. Thank you.
Councillor Brabazon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've never spoken in a budget debate, so this first new maiden speech in budgets. I think it's fair to say, I think we all know, whether we're in the Liberal, whether the majority party or the minority party, a council's job is hugely complicated. And what the council does, how it allocates its resources, is crucial to our local communities. It may be that many people in our community don't understand that, but the fact is how we use the money we have can really impact on our communities, either to their benefit or their detriment. And how we invest our money covers many areas. For example, we can intervene in order to prevent things happening. That's why we spend money on early years. That's why we spend money in adult social care. That's why I'm thrilled, following Councillor Perai's work, Councillor Ahmet's work, that we are spending money on places like Canning Crescent. These are early intervention programmes, both for children and adults, adults with mental ill health, all those sorts of areas. We intervene and prevent problems, acting as a regulator, not something we always talk about, but the fact that we are doing our landlord licensing scheme and hopefully having more enforcement officers funded through the scheme, that we have unsung services like my favourites, trading standards, licensing and food safety. And so acting as a regulator is a really important role, and the fact that we keep these services going is vital, and I'm pleased in our budget that we are doing that. How we safeguard our environment in carbon, air quality, and investing our resources in flood management and areas like that. Again, things we don't often think about. And how we then prioritise what we do in the long term is critical to this budget. So while we are doing the investments year by year in the revenue budget, we also have a capital programme. And this budget, so ably led by Councillor Berryman, seeks to allocate the resources we have to provide as best we can a framework to support our local communities. Time only permits me to mention a few key aspects which underpin our goal of tackling inequality and of mitigating inequality, which in a borough of such wide social disparities, I'm not telling anything you, saying anything none of us don't know and nothing that's new, Haringey is probably the most widely divided borough in London. So, like my colleagues, I think the council tax reduction scheme is a fantastic achievement that we should be really proud of. And in this borough, perhaps setting an example for other boroughs. Reducing the financial burden on thousands of families. We've protected our children's services. That is critically important. Anybody who knows anything in the history of this borough will know how important that is. We have minimised the cuts to adult social care and drawing on our capital programme, which of course I think if we're thinking strategically about our budget, we need to use our capital programme in order to influence and support our revenue programme and to tackle some of the problems that we have. So we are having for the first time, I will, Madam Mayor, investment of some 19 million, I think it is, in our primary schools. Long overdue. And part of that investment is for adaptations for children with special needs. How terrific that is that we will now adapt our mainstream schools to accommodate as many children with special needs in our mainstream schools as we possibly can. Our primary schools, which have been sorely neglected, particularly in Tottenham, over many, many years. I want to say one more thing, and I'll be very quick. This government has placed local government in the ludicrous situation of relying on business rates and council tax to fund our public services. The abolition of the revenue support grant places local government in a position where secure public funding is being systematically withdrawn. What lunacy are we facing where we have to rely on the market to fund our crucial public services? Thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Corley Harrison, but thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems like some of my Labour colleagues have incredibly short memories. Council colleagues, for sure. To have forgotten Alistair Darling in the run-up to the 2010 general election, saying that the cuts planned by Labour would be deeper and tougher than those of Margaret Thatcher. Or Ed Miliband in the run-up to the 2015 general election, who many of you campaigned on a manifesto for, pledging to cut spending. Or Ed Balls, who believed the most important thing was to match the Tory approach to austerity. It must be nice to pick and choose which parts of Labour's recent history to completely eradicate or take any responsibility for. This year's budget sees us once again have less money to support our residents than the year before. Further cuts have to be made to keep our heads above water, but we must also take different approaches to ensure we have the adequate funds to support our residents. Alongside Brexit, one of the most pressing issues facing future generations the world over is the issue of air pollution and climate change. Recently in this chamber, the Lib Dems spoke passionately, eloquently and in detail about the impact of air pollution. This Labour group paid lip service in response. We must act now, but this Labour budget does nothing to tackle the issue here in Haringey. The Lib Dems want to see fewer cars on Haringey roads, plain and simple. That is why we are proposing a workplace parking levy for Haringey that will generate £360,000 by 2020, to be directly invested back into active travel across the borough and no idling zones around every single Haringey school. The levy will apply to any organisation in Haringey that provides 10 or more employee parking spaces at an annual charge of £750 per space beyond this threshold. We will, of course, provide full exemptions for the NHS and partial exemptions for state schools. Workplace parking levies have cross-party support up and down the country, and the success of the scheme in Nottingham has allowed millions of pounds of investment in their tram network, thus taking thousands of car journeys off the road. Now, I'm a realist, and I know that unlike this group of Liberals sat behind me, Labour has a problem in supporting ideas from other parties, so this amendment will likely be voted down. Perhaps this can be considered a seed planted, so that one day, maybe at the next budget, maybe before, we'll see Haringey Labour put forward a workplace parking levy and take real action on air pollution. And when they do, this group will be the first to support you. Madam Mayor, let me finish with a few words should anyone here have felt a twinge in their stomach when those 9 MPs left the Labour Party over the last week, or when Councillor Jess Brain from Barnet or Councillor Danny Hackett from Bexley resigned their Labour whips and also left the party, or when former Haringey councillor Joe Goldberg resigned from Labour just a few days ago, citing anti-Semitism and a direction under Corbyn as the reason why. It doesn't have to be this way. If this Corbyn Labour Party is no longer your Labour Party, I'm just wrapping up. If this Ejiofor Labour Party is no longer your Labour Party, you too can be brave. Your new home may or may not be with my party, but you do not have to stay through an allegiance to a Labour you once knew. That Labour is dead and gone.
Councillor Mogit.
With the greatest of respect, Councillor Dennison should have amended his speech to keep up to date with latest developments. It's been reported in the mainstream media this evening that Labour will back amendment for a second referendum. In light of this, Councillor Dennison's comments about Jeremy Corbyn and a gold-plated unicorn look rather silly. And as for Councillor Luke Harrison's comments about the 9... Crawley Harrison. As for Councillor Crawley Harrison's comments about the 9 Labour MPs, ex-Labour MPs who've left to form this tinge independent group, according to some polls, they are polling better than the Lib Dems. Now think about that. A party that's only a few minutes old polling better than the Lib Dems. It doesn't exist. That makes it even worse. A non-existent party is polling better than the Lib Dems. Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to support the first budget of this Labour administration. Haringey has seen its funding cut by over 60% in real terms since 2010, as the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, the Condem Alliance, condemned us to years of austerity by wielding the axe on local government funding. This evening, I want to focus on some of the progressive measures that we are taking in this budget. I'm really pleased that we are announcing a pilot scheme to provide free school meals to primary school children. When I first got elected as a councillor for Knoll Park, I received a number of postcards from children at Knoll Park Primary School. On the postcards, they drew beautiful little pictures of different types of food that they would like to feed their friends, those from families with no recourse to public funds. As you know, children from families with no recourse to public funds are not entitled to free school meals. So the children from Knoll Park Primary School were appealing to me and my councillor colleagues to provide free school meals to all their friends. And this was probably the first time that these young citizens were lobbying politicians. And I'm really pleased to say that I can go back to those children and tell them that we are putting in place steps through our pilot scheme to provide free school meals to all children, including those from families with no recourse to public funds. This demonstrates this Council's commitment to achieving a fairer Haringey. The second measure that I'm particularly pleased about is the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, which will help 6,000 of the poorest families in Haringey. Of those, 3,000 families will have to pay no council tax whatsoever. This will be welcomed by my constituents in my ward in Knoll Park at a time when the very poorest in our society are feeling the pinch, with deep benefit cuts, introduction of universal credit and rising levels of child poverty and in-work poverty.
Councillor, you're out of time.
This measure will also go some way to make Haringey a fairer place for all our residents. So I'm very pleased to support this budget. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Corley Harrison points out, up and down the country last week, we saw Labour MPs and councillors resigning from their party in protest. Unfortunately, I think, judging by the ridiculous levels of tribalism in this chamber this evening, we're not likely to see an independent table just yet in Haringey, but give it time. And Councillor Moeed, do come have a chat with me. If you're offended by Jeremy riding a multicoloured unicorn, I've got plenty more where that came from. However, I'd like to talk about something a little bit more positive that I hope none of you will roll your eyes at and call a ridiculous Lib Dem policy. I want to talk about school streets because I think we all should think that they're brilliant. So this morning we saw the very first school street scheme launch in the borough. It's my son's school, so I was there volunteering. And bar a couple of unhappy car drivers, parents were overwhelmingly in favour of this scheme. One parent said that he'd had to wait for years to see it happen and was really delighted that Lordship had been selected. It's a real testament, I think, to the hard work of Cabinet members, council officers, the school, and then parents like myself who've lobbied and regularly had to volunteer to ask parents not to park where they shouldn't, that this one scheme has happened. And I tweeted out afterwards how positive it was, and one parent replied back to me and said, "That's great." But then she asked how many more were going to be rolled out. And sadly, I could not give her the answer that I really wanted to, because there hasn't yet been a very clear commitment and investment into this vital programme. Now, we all agree how beneficial school streets are from a pollution, a safety and health perspective, and yet Haringey is still lagging far behind many other London boroughs who face the same cuts, who've been implementing these initiatives over the last few years with very high levels of success. Now, we know from the Mayor's Air Quality Audit that many of our schools face huge challenges with pollution. We know from the health data we collect that many children risk serious problems now and later in life due to inactivity. And we've only got to look at the reduction in traffic during school holidays to see how many short journeys are made to and from school when they really don't need to be. And despite knowing all of this, we've still failed to roll out any substantial programme across the borough that addresses it. Now, I really applaud the commitment and continued investment in young people. So I am simply asking that you support our amendments and commit to investing further in our children's future by doing what I think is the simplest of things, and that's making their journey to school every day cleaner, greener and safer. Thank you.
Councillor Ibrahim.
I'm hopefully going to talk about something that we all agree with, and I think absolutely, you know, I'm probably one of the biggest tribalists in this room, but let me be clear, I'm sure that everybody in this chamber agrees that everybody deserves a safe and decent home to live in. And I'm glad that the Liberal Democrats earlier on reminded us of their support for the wholly owned vehicle, because I think at the last Cabinet meeting you may have slightly forgotten about it. But ultimately, Haringey has pledged to deliver an ambitious programme of council house delivery and building. And we've received lots of questions about when that will start. So let me be clear, with sites, with existing planning permission, which we own, we are ready for the first spades to hit the ground as early as this summer. So in terms of direct delivery, we will be starting that very soon. But what I'm also really proud to be talking about within this budget is the £1 billion that we'll be investing overall. Let me be frank, I could easily say this is, that this was a decision that was easy to make. And we didn't need to wait for Corbyn to ride in on a gold-plated unicorn. It was actually the lifting of the HRA cap that has meant that we can actually start delivering. We would still have been able to deliver the 1,000 homes that we'd committed to through the wholly owned vehicle, but now we are in a far better position to do that directly ourselves. But let's not always just talk about the homes that we will be building, because our existing tenants would quite rightly say to us, well, what about us? Yeah. What about the conditions that we're living in? And actually what I briefly wanted to respond to the gentleman who spoke earlier was actually we know the challenges that are faced within our estates, and that's why I'm so proud that we've just appointed a Deputy Cabinet Member for Housing Standards for Broadwater Farm and Northumberland Park, my colleague Seema Chandwani, because we are taking the issue of housing standards on our estates, and particularly those two estates, very, very seriously. Now, let me be clear, the £250 million will be because only 80% of our homes are at decent home standards. What we've committed to is Decent Homes Plus, and that covers what the gentleman spoke about earlier, because decent homes means from the door to inside your property, so new kitchens, new bathrooms. What we're talking about is from the curb to inside your property. We're taking that extremely seriously. And also we're bringing back estates that were taken out of the Decent Homes programme many years ago. And I want to put a big shout out to our residents on Turner Avenue. Their councillors have campaigned, and we will be investing. And also to Imperial Wharf. This is an estate that we've ignored for many, many years. One final point. For many of you, Finsbury Park, everybody will shout out Live Nation, wireless. That's an important issue too. But for me, Finsbury Park, historically, if you look at the 1980s and the 1990s, it was the history of homeless families. If you come out of the train station now, it's the devastating impact of street homelessness, and we must not forget that challenge. I'm sure many of you use that station every day. Many of you came on the homelessness count with us. So let's talk about some of the things we also agree on.
Councillor Nick Da Costa.
I'm just coming from this little small table I seem to have at the back now. With Brexit just a month away, and the potential cliff edge cannot be ignored, all types of Brexit, hard, soft, semi-soft, will have a devastating impact on this council. The risk that Brexit poses to this council cannot be ignored, and its finances and the ability to look after its residents. Yet the budget papers contain scant references to Brexit. And yes, this will have a huge impact on our borough and the future of this council. It will hammer the residents who live here, the council staff, our supply chain, the value of our loans, the value of our investments, and businesses of all sizes. And this seems to be ignored by the Labour Council's budget. I was speaking with one of my constituents recently. Her husband and her run a small publishing house, mainly focusing on EU and political publications. It's not a lavish business. They've put all their savings into the company because they want something for their kids to inherit. But what happens to them? What support is Haringey Council giving to the small and medium enterprises that make up the backbone of our area? The Council receives a large chunk of its finances from business rates, and yet barely anything has been proposed by the Council to ensure that these companies paying them, especially the small and medium enterprises, are supported through this difficult period. Last week I was honoured to be here in a public event for EU citizens and what the Council is doing to support them. Frustratingly, the Council was unable to give much assurance or guidance. Part of this is because nationally we have no idea what's going on, and every report in the media seems to be changing it every couple of minutes. But it is shocking that only 30 days from a potential Brexit, the Labour Cabinet has still not published a Brexit impact plan and risk strategy. In the meantime, countless councils across the council have published theirs. Bristol Council has published a 33-page risk assessment and impact study. Compare that with the Brexit paper that we've received as councillors, is frankly embarrassing. Look at the paper tabled by Cardiff Council. Again, 26 pages of detailed analysis and strategies that the council officers and cabinet are doing to mitigate Brexit as much as possible. Let's hope the reports in the press this afternoon are correct. Let's hope that Labour, not only locally but nationally, will follow the Lib Dems by supporting a people's vote with a right to remain.
Thank you. Excellent. On time as well. We had 14 speakers. Can I ask the Leader of the Council, you want to speak now? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have enjoyed the debate this evening. There have been a lot of really good contributions from councillors on both sides of the chamber. I do have to say that some of the things that the Lib Dems have talked about are things that we've considered over this side of the aisle. We don't have a tin ear, and it's interesting that we've been offered support for some of the decisions that we might, or for that matter, might not make in the future. But we'll see. All right. Where we are today, it has to be said that Councillor Berryman has brought a robust and just budget for approval by this chamber. And yes, sure, the budget commits to spending £242 million, but it finds space to allocate an additional £7.6 million for investment in children's services and an additional £7 million for investment in adult services. As many speakers have said around this chamber today, Haringey, like most of the country, is facing huge financial challenges. Funding from the government for local public services continues to be cut, whilst demand for these services is rising. The Local Government Association, London councils, chief finance officers up and down the country acknowledge that local government finances are nearing breaking points. And indeed, there's a campaign of many councils up and down the country to press the government on this. It will be good to see the party opposite come and join us on board with that. Use of austerity and funding reductions by central government have forced us to review what and how we deliver the vital services that our residents rely on. We've had to make cuts and we continue to face huge financial challenges. However, we recognise the crucial role that our children and adult services play in helping those most in need, which is why we remain committed to protecting and investing in those services. It's a mark of what sort of community, indeed what sort of society we live in, when we look at how the community invests in its young and how it cares for its elderly. You've already heard Councillor Blake highlighting how we'll invest an additional £250,000 in youth services programme to support our young people, and an additional £500,000 next year to tackle serious youth violence. We're also rolling out a young people at risk strategy, which will take a public health approach to address this problem, and building Haringey Community Gold, a network of connected community programmes that will also recruit the next generation of youth and community workers. Furthermore, we've already made a commitment within our manifesto to fundamentally oversee how we deliver adult social care for the residents of Haringey and what additional buildings-based services that we can deliver for them. We're also committed to investing our capital wisely, putting almost £1 billion on housing in Haringey over the next 5 years to increase the overall number of traditional council homes and to bring 99% of our stock up to decent plus homes standard. When we stated in our manifesto a commitment to adding an additional 1,000 council homes in the borough, our critics said that it just couldn't be done. Councillor Ibrahim will be bringing forward our housing strategy over the forthcoming year, and that will clarify how we will deliver this goal. We'll also be publishing our proposed support for the third of Haringey residents who rent in the private sector. That's selective and additional landlord licensing. 9 years of austerity have hit Haringey Council's finances hard. As again people have said, central government grant funding has been reduced by £122 million. That's an equivalent of £405 per resident. A growing population, government cuts to benefits and increasing rents have placed more and more stress on people, which increases the call on services. We've already used money from our reserves but these can only provide so much mitigation. We remain committed to funding key services across Haringey, and we've had to increase base council tax this year by 2.99%. That's the first increase in base council tax in 9 years. This will add 73 pence each week to the average council tax bill. However, on this side, we believe that the greatest weight should be carried by those with the broadest shoulders, and hence we're also ensuring our least well-off families will be eligible for 100% relief for changing our council tax reduction scheme. This is a difficult time. Councils across the country are at breaking point. If cuts continue, vital services will be at risk. However, the Westminster Government is preoccupied by finding new and more imaginative ways to mess up the country and destroy our children's future. Rather than honestly investing in local services, ensuring that councils have the money necessary to support their residents, Mrs May and Chris Gayling are phoning up multi-million-pound contracts for ferry companies that have no ferries. It's shameful. Your council is doing all it can to make Haringey a cleaner, greener, safer and fairer borough, whilst protecting the qualities of our neighbourhoods that we value most. But national government does not believe in fairness. This Tory government wants to transfer money from deprived urban communities to the leafy shires. They believe that money should not be allocated because of deprivation and need, but should be allocated because of rurality and sparsity. This Tory government believes that the poor should be subsidising the rich. This is clearly neither fair nor right. In Haringey, we are delivering a budget for the people, all of the people, a budget that will support the many, not the few, a budget that protects our least well-off residents, young people, our elderly residents, a budget that protects services, a budget that uses its resources prudently. I commend this budget to the Chamber.
Thank you very much. Councillor Daniel, can I ask you to respond? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to take each speaker in turn, if I could. Councillor Gunes mentioned the council tax reduction scheme. We obviously voted for that, and that helps families in Haringey. One thing that also helps families and children in this borough is the £14.5 million of pupil premium that the borough gets. That's 12,000 students. That's £1,208 each year. Councillor Blake, I'm glad, obviously glad that we've got the £250,000 for youth services and the £1.5 million for 3 years. That is only for 3 years. Our £1 million by reducing temps and agency staff puts that on a long-term footing for the future. Councillor Des Neves, we are against the Tory austerity agenda. Why wouldn't we be? I don't think you seem to think that we're not against austerity. Of course we are. But we've set out today, our amendment says that we've got money from elsewhere. Now, we've got £2 million from senior management, if you want to cut that, £1 million from consultants, if you want to cut that, £400,000 from the communications budget, if you want to do that. Now, the only option is that those are the options. The only thing that I can think of is that you don't want to do them. Councillor Demir, as Councillor Corley Howison says, the last Labour Secretary to the Treasury said that there's no money left. It's kind of an inconvenient truth that the Labour Party left the country in rather a bad state when it was last in government. And actually the Lib Dems raised the threshold in income tax, which took 3 million people out of paying income tax at all. You can't say that that would not help. Councillor Brabazon, obviously we support investment in our schools and housing. Yes, we've got the most divided, one of the most widely divided equality boroughs in London. It was 50 years ago, and it is still now. You've been in charge for 50 years. Come on. Councillor Moyet, so how long does it take, Jeremy, to actually support a second referendum then? Does that mean you guys do 2 because you didn't last time? Yeah. It's like, too right. Just on free school meals, it was actually a Liberal Democrat. It was a Liberal Democrat policy in the coalition that was scrapped by the Tories. It was a policy in the coalition that was scrapped by the Tories. Councillor Ibrahim, who isn't here. We will continue to. We will continue to be a critical friend on the expenditure of £1 billion of taxpayers' money. We will continue to do that, obviously. Councillor Ejiofor, the fact that you're interested in our amendments, that's fantastic. Let's do it now. We can stop standing orders now, get out of the room, and we can have a chat about it. I'm happy to do that. Councillor Berryman, you said that you wanted to do all of these things that the council used to do again. Now, I've given you some good examples of how we can. You said day centres. Yes, finally we've got to that. Meals and Wheels and youth services. We've got money for that if you want to make different choices. And that is, this evening we have a clear choice to agree more funding for our young people, our police, our parks, and devolve money to our communities. This is set out fully costed and deliverable by reducing funding on my senior staff, setting up an in-house recruiter, stop the Hayes contract, wean ourselves of an expensive agency costs, stop lining the pockets of high-paid consultants, and trialling new innovative ways to raise revenue and reduce traffic too. Please support the amendments.
Thank you. Councillor Berryman, you have up to 10 minutes to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks to everyone for their contributions. Whew. It's hectic stuff. I'm not sure I'm up to everybody replying to everything that was said, but I'll try in a roundabout way. First of all, I'll commend the Lib Dems for finally having a clear policy, which is their Brexit policy. Apart from that, I don't actually know what you stand for. Just the amendments tonight alone, 6 billion of amendments over 4 years, less than 0.25% of the budget, and 2 million for this year you want to fund, yet you wanted to freeze council tax for another 4 years. So that would have wiped 3 million off this year's budget straight off the bat. So I don't know what you would have been cutting to pay for that. Councillor De Neves mentioned finding money down the back of the sofa, and then afterwards Liberal Democrat councillors who have been very good in this debate in terms of how they've articulated what they're doing. It's just the substance of it. It seemed to me, Councillor De Neves is saying we are struggling to find money, and one of the reasons is austerity, a policy the Lib Dems engaged in. Yet you've got lots of tips on how we can now solve that. It feels a little to me like a child taking another child's piggy bank, smashing it on the floor, watching the money roll away, and then giving them tips on, oh, that one just fell down there, oh, you missed that. Oh, how about you were there all the way. Which is why, partly, when I won a seat in Fortis Green just over 4 years ago, which hasn't been a Labour stronghold over the years, was the electorate, even in Fortis Green, having a look at the Lib Dems in government and going, oh dear, no. So you're back in opposition. You're back in opposition where you generally are, and congratulations on having a policy. I'll try to go through some of the things. So the police, it's a catchy phrase, and the Lib Dems do a lot of communications. They want to attack communications, but they seem to spend most of their time bombarding the community with these sort of empty phrases. Tony Blair said, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. The youth violence we see, the terrible youth violence that we see, is not just about a lack of policing. And that's why we've chosen to prioritise the cause of crime and put an extra £250,000 and work with the Mayor to get an extra £1.5 million from a Labour Mayor to really work on the ground, as Councillor Blake I know will do, to try and prevent crime and not just deal with it. We also know, as we said, the Labour Mayor will be putting a significant amount of money into policing this year, when it's not really his role, that's government's role. Income tax, corporation tax, they're the progressive taxes that should pay for policing, not council tax. That's not what it's here for, and it's not here either to subsidise the health service when people are kicked out of beds and we have a just ever-growing burden of adult social care. So, but the Labour Mayor has had to step up where the Conservatives have let everybody down, and we're going to step in and try and do something with the causes of crime. We've moved that money. Haringey residents are putting £2 million more into the police this year. That's the GLA precept. And again, Councillor Blake will be working with the GLA to make sure Haringey see as much of that money as possible. Moving on to just some of your other ideas. which you say we are copying. I mean, if you'd brought these ideas a little earlier, we could have a bit more time to think about them, rather than saying, let's go out of the room now and suspend standing orders. How about sending them in before 10 a.m. on the last day? But many of the things you've said we have been doing, consultants and that sort of spend, has been coming down 37% since 2015, and we want to keep that trajectory going. We believe in council services. A lot of councils were moving to being what was called a commissioning council a few years ago. Then things like Carillion happened, and even, we might say Grenfell, some terrible things happened, and people now realise we need councils. And we are like some other councils, we're having to turn this ship around. And so in the interim, you do need some interims, because we don't have all the officers. We lost 45% of our council staff. We're trying to build back up from the ravages of austerity. The Hayes contract you mentioned, that would be part of the process. We would probably need to think about a more serious HR offer down the line now that we are reinvesting in our council. The same with our parks. We didn't want to be reliant on endless events in parks. Sometimes can seem endless to certain councillors. But we didn't want to be in that situation. The Victorians created parks as a free place for people to go who didn't have gardens, and that included things like public toilets where people could go out and didn't have to worry about finding a toilet or something like that. So we would love to do that, but in the meantime, we don't want to see our parks go back to the way I remember them actually in the 80s under Thatcher, where Haringey parks, there were problems. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that back. So if in the interim, to protect our parks, we have to do a few events, we'll have to do it. Devolved funding, we did the ward budgets. It was relatively successful, but right now we don't have money to... It's choices. We have to make our choices, and we're going to go for children's and adults and families that debt is forcing them into court summonses and bailiffs and all the rest of it, and it's not possible at the moment to do everything we want to do. So I thank you for your amendments. Next time, bring them in a bit earlier, and thank you for your contributions in the debate and everybody else's. And other than that, I think I can say I recommend our budget to full council. Thank you.
We will now vote on each of the amendments. In respect of the Amendment 1, all those in favour, please show your hands. Raise your hands. Those against? Yeah. Thank you. Any abstentions? No. The amendment is lost. In respect of Amendment 2, all those in favour, please vote. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Amendment is lost. In respect of Amendment 3, all those in favour? All those against? Yeah. Thank you. Any abstentions? No. It's lost. Amendment is lost. In respect of Amendment 4, all those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Amendment is lost. in respect of Amendment 5, all those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Amendment is lost. Now, in respect of the substantive recommendations contained at pages 100 of the agenda pack, this is the section 1.1 of the main report. Sorry, 3.1 of the main report, items A to O. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? The recommendations are agreed? Yes, thank you. That concludes the business on the agenda. Thank you very much.